One who I'm very pleased to be naming is, of course, Candace Owens in her Australian television debut. Now, Candace Owens, for those of you are not familiar with her, in September 2017, she launched Red Pill Black, a website and YouTube channel that promotes black conservatism in the United States. In April 28, Kanye West tweeted, "I love the way Candace Owens thinks." That tweet was met with derision by all the usual suspects, but in May 2018, President Donald Trump said that Candace Owens is having a big impact on politics in our country. She represents an ever-expanding group of very smart thinkers, and it is wonderful to watch and hear the dialogue going on. So good for our country, tweeted the president. Candace registered as a Republican in 2018 after the hearings following Brett Kavanaugh's nomination as a Supreme Court judge, where she quite rightly pointed out that what was happening was social lynching of Kavanaugh on the grounds that to believe all women was the reason, as Candace put it, our ancestors got lynched. Candace has also been a guest host on Fox News. She hosts the Candace Owens Show on Praga YouTube, which you must watch. I urge you to get on and watch that. In April, Owens announced her intention to either run for office in the US Senate or to be a governor. Candace Owens, so great. Welcome to Outsiders. So great to have you here. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
Well, you once said that you became a conservative overnight. Tell us about tell us a little bit about your background, your childhood and your story, and that transition point.
Yes, for certain. I think I should clarify that, though, because I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, you literally became a conservative overnight." I mean that it happened very quickly for me. I grew up sort of under the regular illusion that Black Americans grow up under, which is that if you are Black, you must assign yourself to all of these democratic principles. You must therefore vote for Democrats for the rest of your life. Conservatives are racist, Republicans are racist all over the world. They want to send the world backward. And I grew up with sort of that sleepy narrative because of the education system. The public school system practically teaches that. If you don't come out of school and you're not a liberal, that would be very bizarre. It's very usual for children, of course, to be liberals. Today, more commonly, to be Marxists. Around the time that Trump started running for president was really my transition. I would say that my thought process was that he was not qualified to be president when he came down the escalator in 2015 with his wife. But what was more interesting than the things that I was thinking about him was the things that I was not thinking about him. And I watched a man that was virtually celebrated everywhere in our media for decades. Everybody loved Trump. The hip-hop music that I listened to growing up, people wanted to be like Trump. He was just so glorified and so loved until he announced his candidacy for the White House. And then essentially overnight, they were saying this man was a racist, a sexist, a misogynist, a homophobe, all of these things. That he was literally Hitler. And I just wasn't foolish enough to believe that this man was converted to all of these things overnight. So it just forced me to really question the narrative and to ask myself if it was plausible that racism was being used as a theme to turn Black Americans into single-issue voters. And I started digging and listening to other conservative voices, and I found out that, oh, wow, I actually have always been a conservative. I just didn't know it. I believe in all of the things that conservatives hold dear. I just didn't know it. So I always say that conservatives have they don't do a really good job of communicating what their ideas are, and that's usually due to the fact that the left has a stranglehold on culture and on media. And I think for the first time, conservatives are fighting back in this new frontier of social media. Conservatives have been winning, and that's why we see the left today doing all that they can to censor and to shut down conservative voices on social media.
Candace, we spoke a couple of weeks ago to you, a brilliant member of your team, Gina Florio, about Blexit, about the movement that you set up to get people to walk away from the Democrats and to become more conservative. You've been a harsh critic of Black Lives Matter. Tell us what you make of the last couple of months since George Floyd's death.
The last couple of months, I say to people, I guess I either had a crystal ball or this has all been planned for a very long time, because I've been warning of this. I've written about it. I've given speeches about it in virtually every state in America, warning that in 2020 we would be watching some man die, and the left would use that as a means to try to manipulate Black Americans, and not just a means to manipulate Black Americans, because what you're seeing today, Black Lives Matter, has virtually nothing to do with Black people and nothing to do with preserving Black lives. Of course, if they cared about Black lives, the focus would be on Black communities, and the number one focus would be on Black violence, which is a real issue in America. Instead, they look at something that virtually never happens. And when I say virtually never happens, I mean it happens 9 times a year, which means police almost have a perfect record in terms of arresting violent Black criminals. 9 times a year, it's a very small window of error when Black Americans have to hand up police officers. Now, we're not condoning that, but to see something like what happened with George Floyd, who was a career criminal, turn into basically Marxism, communism brought to America, them demanding that we change the name, that we wipe history, that we pretend history didn't happen, that we change the year when America even began. You have the 1619 Project with the New York Times. This was really, Black people have always just been a conduit to the left to pursue their more nefarious goals. You can look, and what always surprises me is that people won't even look at their website. They're not even trying to hide what they're after. They routinely attack on their website the nuclear family. They tell you essentially that they are Marxists. It reads a lot like Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto. They think there's something fundamentally wrong and backwards about Western society. It's why they virtually have wiped out Western civilization across college campuses in America, because they want people to hate, to think that there's something fundamentally backwards and wrong about Western civilization. So that's what Black Lives Matter is really all about. It's really just a costume for white liberals and people who wish to see the destruction of Western civilization to wear as they destroy everything that we hold dear in this nation.
Rita.
I want to ask you about the impact of the victim mentality on the Black community, particularly on children who are being indoctrinated to believe that they're going to be discriminated against throughout their life. They're going to have to overcome enormous hurdles, and there's institutional racism in the US. What is the impact of that?
It's so funny that you asked me that question. It sounds like I gave you a copy of my book early, because I wrote a whole chapter on this. And I just spelled out the examples of what we're starting to see in America, which is we're starting to see Black children fake their own hate crimes. We're starting to see all of these hoaxes happen where Black Americans pretend that white Americans. There was a young girl who was 8 years old who pretended that 3 white boys held her down in school and cut off her braids and referred to her as racial slurs. This is happening over and over again. There are plenty of examples happening. Victim mentality is really, it's a cancer, right? There's an old expression that my grandfather used to say to me when I was growing up, which is that if you believe that you cannot, you won't. I mean, it's really that simple. If your mindset is that you can't, and there's no way you can do it, you're never even going to try. And that's part of what they want, right? Because what they look for when they see Black Americans, and now we're starting to see that they're pivoting and looking at Latino Americans as well, is a permanent underclass, right? Marxism can only exist if there is an underclass. If you have a bunch of people, a group of people that you keep convincing that, this is happening to you because of some other, if you are poor, it's because of rich people. If you're Black, it's because of white people. If you're women, it's because of men. And so this is what they're doing. They want people to have this curse of a victim mentality because it forces them not to want to dig inside of themselves and try to pursue things and to realize, you know what, I'm not oppressed. I can do this. This takes work ethic. This takes good decision making. This takes staying out of trouble. Instead, they say, you know what, Black America, you're blameless. Even when you are the aggressor, even when you are the oppressor, you're somehow blameless. We saw that in the virtual cleaning of George Floyd's entire past and history. I mean, talk about someone who did harm Black lives. His entire life was spent making Black victims, whether it was via, his drugs, his violences, his armed robberies. They turned him into a saint. There are people that now get baptized where George Floyd died. This is sort of crazy stuff that we're seeing, where people that have done good things, like Frederick Douglass, whose statue was pulled down in America, are being wiped away from history, and people like George Floyd are being elevated. So, victim mentality it's a cancer, and I really do believe that it's killing Black American dreams.
James.
When I look, Candace, at the Black Lives Matter movement now, and especially where it's going, I see an awful lot of white people who are either on the streets now using this as an excuse to protest, or more insidiously in the corporate suites and in the bestseller lists now, using this as a way to get rich, to acquire power in organizational structures, and to assuage their own guilt. What do you think of the way in which essentially this movement, which starts with from a good premise that yes, all lives matter, but that Black lives need to be cherished, becomes now just another way for white Americans on the left to basically acquire, more power, more money, and more sort of ability to do their own thing while ignoring the plight of the people who live in black communities that are now going to suffer the results of defunded police and everything else that goes with it?
Well, I'll disagree with you on thinking that it had more benign beginnings. It didn't. Black Lives Matter was always, something that was started by wealthy white corporate liberals. Its earliest injection of $33 million cash came from George Soros, and there isn't a more nefarious character, that funds these sort of Marxist movements all over the world. He's banned from countries for doing these sorts of things, funding uprisings. Again, it was always a costume. It was always white liberals behind it. But to answer your question in terms of how I view these virtue signaling, white people who know nothing about what's going on in the black community, they don't understand, when they say defund the police. Do you think defunding the police is going to harm these celebrities who have private security guards, who, if these cities start burning, can hop on their private jets and fly somewhere else or abandon the country? No, of course not. We've seen that. So we're not guessing about this stuff anymore. We're seeing that in inner cities right now. New York City, I believe, last week had a 267% increase in shootings from the year prior. And we're de-incentivizing police officers to do their job. But this was the goal. So this is what Black Lives Matter looks like when it's successful. In terms of these corporations, they make me sick. I think these people have become spineless. The question that I have to these white Americans who are capitulating to the left on Black Lives Matter, who are firing people for not being black. We've seen this virtual witch hunt go on where people, we need more black people, so you got to go, or you once had a normal spat with a person of another color, so you've got to get fired. I'm going to drop you from this show. To what end would be my question to these people. To what end? You are helping to build a society that, forget you not flourishing in. You got to grow up and make stupid decisions and get behind this Marxist movement. But what about your offspring? You are essentially ushering in a period where it is okay to be racist towards white people. There's this myth that Black Lives Matter operates under, which is that black people cannot be racist to white people. I think we could not be in a more racist period in America toward white people. I can't imagine walking down the street. My husband is white, and when I read certain articles, I play a game where I'll just switch the races, right? So you'll see an article on, we have BuzzFeed in America, I don't know if you have that, and it will say, it's time for white people to just shut up. And I just switch the race. Imagine waking up and seeing an article that read, it's time for black people to just shut up. It's unimaginable. It's unimaginable.
Exactly.
So these people are just completely hoodwinked and delusional, and again, ushering in a time that is going to be impossible for their white offspring to live.
Candace Owens, you're an absolute breath of fresh air. Thanks so much for coming on Outsiders today. America's very, very lucky to have you.